Duke Tobin addressed the media yesterday. Of course, was asked about their mindset and their plan heading into the draft this weekend. Obviously, recapping a lot of recap questions regarding their activity during free agency. A little underwhelming there. We talked about the Reds and their underwhelming offseason when it came to adding free agents. I think that you could say pretty much the same thing about the Cincinnati Bengals. It's funny because it's been a successful offseason, successful for the Bengals thus far, because you obviously got the contracts done with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. Obviously, Gesicki. Obviously, there's a big question mark with what the future holds, obviously, for Trey Hendrickson. Not really Trey Hendrickson, but the contract, moreover, whether they get an extension done with him there. But there was a lot that was discussed yesterday. A lot of questions were kind of thrown in the direction of Duke Tobin. The one that caught my attention the most, you brought up earlier the fact that the Browns and Giants are both kicking the tires on potentially moving back in the draft with their first-round selections. Of course, with the second, and do the Giants have the fifth or the sixth? Is it the Giants, are they sitting at 5 or 6?
They're picking third.
They're picking third. Okay, so no, 5 or 6. They're picking
Titans,
third.
Browns,
My
Giants.
bad. So no, with that being said, the Bengals, Duke Tobin was just talking about the amount of draft picks that they have. He says right now we have 6 picks, and we'd like to have a few more. Well, for you to have a few more, that means one of those 6 picks you would have to part ways with. And you would have to part ways with a high enough draft pick to be able to justify getting more picks in this year's draft, unless you're swapping picks, which wouldn't make a whole lot of sense at this point. When you heard that, what was your initial reaction? Do you anticipate the Bengals giving up one of these picks to accrue a couple more in this year's draft?
I was like a kid on Christmas. That Duke Tobin press conferences are usually brutal listens. This quote was phenomenal. I mean, Casey and I have been talking about how bad this team needs to trade back in this draft for months and just basically ignoring it on mock drafts and draft talk because the Bengals don't do that. They just don't operate that way, and they don't normally care about the amount of assets they have going into the draft. They're just comfortable with what they got. It doesn't seem to be the case this year. It seems like Duke Tobin understands how important this draft is and that they need to get more assets to attack a really deep class. That's another reason why it's so important this year. I wouldn't be so gung-ho on the Bengals trading back if I didn't have faith in the middle rounds of this class. How many times talking about the 2025 draft have I said it's so deep you're going to be able to get multiple starters? That's what the Bengals will be doing by trading back from 17 to, say, 31 with the Eagles, who have been reported as being interested in trading up, or 28 with the Commanders, who are interested in trading up. By moving back 10 spots, does it take off some of those studs that could potentially be falling from the top 15? Absolutely. But that's a trade I'm willing to make for a 3rd or 4th round pick that gets me another starter this year. Maybe that's the second guard we get to take to not have to start Lucas Patrick or Cody Ford.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the luxury pick at running back, getting someone that's a little bit better with the 6th pick instead of the 5th pick that we have. Maybe that's the ability that we had in our mock draft to take that wide receiver that falls and is a really exciting player. Adding more assets for the Bengals really frees them up with what the corner they've backed themselves into with the team need being so pronounced going in. They have to draft pass rush. They have to draft pass protection, and they need more picks in order to have some more fun, be able to go best player available, which is something else they mentioned yesterday. Bengals director of player personnel indicated that the Bengals are likely to go with best player available at pick 17, and this is something that I normally love, but scared me pretty drastically because I don't know if the Bengals have that luxury anymore.
Yeah.
That's what you should do. But when you don't sign a lineman worth a damn in free agency and you don't sign any edge rushers to pair with Trey Hendrickson, you can't go best player available. You have to draft the best guard or the best edge rusher on the board, and that's how you get a Billy Price situation.
Yeah, if I were the Bengals, I wouldn't trade back just because I think the Bengals need this pick. I don't want to trust the organization who has been historically unable to draft to get a pick later than the pick that they currently have and make that work. I understand what everybody's saying. I understand that. But for me, if we can get somebody that's better with 17 than we're going to get later back, then yeah, I'm going to take the first pick available that we have. It just doesn't make sense to me to trade back when you so desperately need the Bengals to be great. If I trusted them to be good at drafting players, then this wouldn't be a question. But I don't trust them to draft well.
So wouldn't you like to give them more at-bats?
More at-bats, but more at-bats later on in the game when you're already down a run.
I think 17 to 20, you can get just as good of impact starters in the 2nd and 3rd round.
I think that's more than fair. I just don't trust them to do it, and it's up to the Bengals to prove me wrong.
If I can add my tidbit here, I think it's also just the timing factor as well. I don't necessarily mind a trade back during the draft when I can see the board and see who's available, because it makes sense to trade back. If you've got 5 guys you like and you can trade back 3 spots, then you do that. You go get that extra pick and you still got 2 guys you're comfortable with at whatever pick 20 then at that point if you're trading back 3 spots. But you get my point. I agree with Jacob in the idea that there's a lot of depth in the second and third round. We both agreed that trading back was kind of like the ideal scenario for this team to be able to get as many picks as possible. I think also to pair that with the idea that we've heard reports that they don't care about character concerns just opens up the board that much more to what we thought might not be possible. The Mike Greens and the James Pierce Jr.'s of the world that have those character concerns, the Walter Nolans, they're available. And maybe before we might not have thought that. So I think trading back makes a lot of sense for the Bengals. I personally wouldn't do it today. I would wait till the draft day to make that move, because also teams are going to be more desperate to make a move on that day. I think the Bengals notoriously won't make a deal that's not benefiting them the most. Just historically speaking, that's just how it's been. So I think that it makes more sense to wait, but it's the smart thing to do to get more at-bats, as Jacob put it, to get more swings, to try to get a guy that can start for this team just simply because of the depth of the draft, the positions of need that they have. Personally, I want them to go BPA, but it's hard to do that with 6 picks. It's really hard to do that with 6 picks. I've been trying to rack my brain around how you can do it, and unless you feel comfortable with, like what Jacob said, rolling out a Lucas Patrick or a Cody Ford day one as your right guard or left guard, there's not many ways to really slice 6 picks to fill in all the needs and get the depth that you need. So for me, I think it makes sense to trade back anywhere between 5 picks is probably the most I would go back. Anywhere more than that, you're getting into the spots where like the Ravens are.
Unless you get 2 or 3 picks.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on how much compensation you get to. But you get into that area where these teams don't care about those character concerns as well, like the Ravens. Then it gets a little more dicey. But, yeah, trading back makes a lot of sense to me.
Another team reportedly interested in trading up right in that range. You said that 5 or so pick range, the Denver Broncos. So reportedly the Commanders, Eagles, and Broncos, 3 teams behind the Bengals, interested in trading up. If they make a move, at least right now, it seems like it would be one of those 3 teams. Not a lot of teams reported moving up. A lot of teams reportedly trying to move down. I think the question has to be asked, what are you moving up for? I think if the Broncos or say the Eagles are wanting to move up for a tight end, say a Colston Loveland, then 17 might be a perfect spot for them. Broncos have also been reported interested in Ashton Genty, in which case the Bengals are nowhere near a range to draft him. They'd be looking to move much closer to the top 10. So, I think what these teams want is certainly also in play as well, to whether the Bengals would be interested in, or they would be interested in talking with the Bengals about pick 17. I don't know, but I think the best case scenario, honestly, is to trade Trey Hendrickson for a late first-round pick with either the Commanders or the Eagles, like we saw in the Ringer mock draft. And the Eagles reportedly interested in trading for a veteran difference maker as well. But if not, I am very, very happy at potentially moving back.
Yeah, just the scenario that I gave to Jacob was, how much better are you in the future of the Bengals having a Walter Nolan and a James Pierce Jr.? Like, let's just say you did trade that first-round pick with Commanders for Trey Hendrickson.
Yeah.
You might lose some production there, obviously, losing the best pass rusher in the NFL, but you have team control of 2 guys that you're expecting to be pretty damn good pass rushers, and then, you're expecting some development from the other guys, and it's better to have it come from 2 guys than 1, because they can't focus all their attention on Trey like they've been doing the last couple seasons. So, yeah, I mean, I feel like the idea of them somehow getting a second first-rounder would be amazing, in my opinion. I know a lot of people would be very upset with it, but I think the payoff of having it long-term figured out the solution there is just so beneficial for this team moving forward.
Yeah, in 2025, would it be lopsided between, say, a James Pierce and a Mike Green versus Trey Hendrickson in terms of stats? Absolutely. I'm sure it would be very hard for Bengals fans to watch. Do you think James Pierce and Mike Green have maybe more sacks and more QB pressures from their age 21 season to their age 26 season than Trey Hendrickson from age 31 to age 36? Maybe. I think it's very, very close.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's certainly a move that I would, be interested in making if you can move Trey for a first-round pick, because I know how impatient Bengals fans are right now. I'm right there with you. We've missed the playoffs the last 2 years with Joe Burrow playing great football and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. It's frustrating. But this isn't a one-year window. This is a team that, has T. Higgins locked up, has Jamar Chase locked up, has Joe Burrow locked up. This is a team that, we're trying to be a perennial contender. And can this team contend this year, swapping Trey Hendrickson for one of those guys? Absolutely. They certainly can. And can they contend and maybe even be better in the years in the immediate future? I really do think so. So I would be pretty eager to try to get Trey traded for premium value before the draft starts. I'm out on moving him after the draft.
Yeah, I am too. And just to also keep in mind too, the draft, or not the draft capital, excuse me, the cap space that they would have. Currently it's sitting at 70 or 80 million going into next season. And that's before obviously getting anything done with Trey, in which we talked about how much that would be. It's like a $35 million payday for him. So next year would be like you're only working with 40 instead of 70, 80. I think it's a no-brainer. You walk into next season with 80 million and you can really start handing out some big contracts for any difference maker that wasn't able to get it done this season.
But didn't you say that, and this isn't like an argument, but that was like the mindset of the Bengals heading into this offseason. Everyone anticipated that they had a ton of cap space.
Yeah, but they had to pay Jamar and T and Trey. This next season, there's no one like Cam Taylor-Britt, and that's it.
That's part of why we were saying there's no excuse not to pay these guys right now. Is because you look down the line on this team, there's not a lot of guys you're looking to extend. I mean, maybe they tear it up next year and surprise you, and you give them a deal that makes sense for both sides, like we did kind of Joseph Osai this year with the 1-year extension, BJ Hill, an extension to stay here in Cincinnati. But there's no one on this team that's not signed right now, with the exclusion of the current Trey Hendrickson situation, that I would be losing sleep over not having long-term here in Cincinnati, which is not a great place to be.
Right. And that's kind of our point, though, is, if things were to go awry, you make that trade and things go terribly wrong and the defense doesn't improve at all, you didn't just, take all your future cap space away by giving Trey Hendrickson a deal. You now have 80 million and the future to play with to get a difference maker that didn't get paid somewhere else. So I think it makes a lot of sense. I know people will hate that, but I think it's a smart move if they can get it done. Without getting a first-round pick, though, I don't think it makes a lot of sense because
I don't necessarily disagree, but I would just bump that back to maybe top 40 or so.
Yeah. Because if they get like a James Pierce Jr. with that pick, then it makes all the sense in the world to do that. But if not, then it's it depends on what they pick.
Absolutely. But excluding Trey Hendrickson, I think there's a reasonable expectation that the pick at 17, if it is a pass rusher, defensive player, is going to be the best player on this defense this year. Yeah. If it's Walter Nolan, if it's James Pierce, if it's Mike Green, if it's Jihad Campbell, whenever he's fully healthy, I'm pretty confident in one of those guys, whoever they pick out of those guys, unless there's a surprise or one of the two defensive names we said we don't want, in Shamar Stewart or from Georgia.
Michael,
absolutely. If it's one of those guys, I certainly don't agree, but any of the guys that we've talked about a lot on this show, I'm confident in them being our best defensive player next year. So if you can get two of them, what a great spot to be in.
Yeah.